celebrating 15 years of possibility. Pilot Flying J and Halloran Hilton Hill present Anything is Possible. Today's guest, Josh Smith, Part 1.
Welcome to another edition of Anything is Possible. Great stories about great people whose lives are proof that anything is possible. And what does the word possible mean? It means it can be. It can be. And Josh Smith is one of those people who believes in possibility. Thank you for being here to bear witness to that.
Absolutely, Alan.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee. After a little while in Nashville, we started in Clarksville. My father left when I was about 2. My brother was just a baby. And then we moved to Nashville, and we moved to the inner city, the projects.
Really?
And we did. And then after a while, worked out of there and moved to Smyrna, Tennessee, and then back to Clarksville for some years, and then here.
Your company is really successful. Did you imagine that you would be running, I think I was looking at the numbers, a company that's doing $16 million a year, headed toward 20? Was that on your radar?
No, you know, it's funny. I say this to a lot of the people that work for me that I didn't go to college. A lot of people look at me and think, okay, he must have some business background, business degree. And then I remind them I didn't even graduate high school.
You didn't graduate from high school?
I didn't graduate high school. That wasn't even college was never even a possibility in my family or the thought of that. It was never even on the radar. And it was just about surviving, just about getting out and making it. And so yeah, I mean, I look around every day. I mean, I look this morning, we had a meeting, I look at all these employees and I'm
How many
thinking,
do you have?
I don't even know. I think it's over 100 now. We're hiring. We can't even fill the need that we have for our company. So a service business, and it's just crazy.
So how do we get here? Because you didn't finish high school, right?
No.
You didn't go to college.
No.
How much education did you get?
I got a lot on the streets. Since then, I've become an avid reader. I like to study people. I like to study stories. I like to just read about those stories. It shows like this. I mean, seeing those things, those biographies of the people that just made it through these impossible circumstances.
How do you make it out of that life? And did your life ever take any wrong turns?
Well, it did. I was in jail the first time when I was 16 years old. So my father had left. I was actually
the first time you
the
were in
first
jail.
time. I was taken out of the home at around 10 or 11. Had a stepfather and some issues with that, and then coming back. So, at 13, 14 years old, back with my mother. She wasn't with him anymore, and just trying to figure life out. So I was kind of on my own at that time, very independent, very just a strong-willed child by that time, and just always getting in trouble. It wasn't, just the wrong people, and I was one of the wrong people, so it wasn't just the other influence on my life. I was a bad influence even on others' lives. And then ended up getting in trouble again at 20 years old. And that was kind of that determining, that wake-up time for me of kind of just, all right, what's going on? Is this what life is? Is this what it's going to be?
You go back to jail.
I go back to jail. I did.
So you're in jail the second time, and what were you thinking, and what happened to change directions?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I wasn't even thinking about change. I was still thinking about other ways that I was going to continue to get in trouble. It was kind of for me, it was, I don't want to say it was a foregone conclusion, but once I had landed there, it's the second time of being in trouble after I said I wasn't going to, you get out of the first one and you're not going to do another one. And there I was, and so I began to already plan what I was going to do kind of in the wrong way, where I was going to go.
So you're in jail and you're going, if I get back out, I'm going to be a smarter criminal.
Yeah, correct. That's,
that's,
and you're in there with a lot of guys that, they're all figuring out the same thing as well. So everybody's, sharing stories and those things. And but it was an impact that happened to me very short time after I was in that changed my life forever.
Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to find out that impact, that moment of impact, because you're trying to calculate how you can recalibrate yourself as a better criminal, right?
Yeah.
And then something happens to you that recalibrates your life.
Yeah.
This is Anything is Possible. This is Josh Smith. More in a moment.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
I used to get some real big laughs out of people when I was studying these things. You're a convict, and you're not going to be anything. And I just continued to push on and make plans.
Welcome back to Anything is Possible. When I was at his company, Master Dry, I was there for an event, I was speaking, and I met you. I'm looking around this fabulous facility, and I'm seeing all these powerful, positive quotes, and just the energy of the building was just right. Being a student of culture myself, corporate culture, we have a great team here that we produce with every year. So I know about energy and culture and getting the right people. I felt this powerful energy. And then somebody started telling me little pieces of your story, and I'm like, there's no way. You started telling us your story in segment one of the broadcast. At 16, you go to jail. Okay, I'm not gonna do that anymore. Broken home. You're back in jail at 20. You're trying to figure out, okay, I'm not gonna go to jail anymore because I'm gonna be a better criminal. And then something happened to you. What happened?
So, if you would have asked me, hey, are you a Christian? I would have said yes, because you're American, right? I mean, isn't
Right.
that the way that it is? I mean, we grow up here, of course. And I remember there was this guy, his name was Jonathan Mays, probably 6'4", real tall, big black guy, comes up to me and starts talking to me about Christ and just sharing just some things about God. And I was so angry, and I just took it out on him. And I talked to him terrible, and I made sure that everybody around got to hear it. I said, don't ever come talk to me.
You
about
cussed
that
him
stuff.
out.
I cussed him out bad. And one of the things I tell the guys when I'm speaking at different places is I literally had to learn how to re-talk. I mean, I had to learn how to communicate from that part of my life. And so I did that, and I still remember the look on his face. I still remember the reaction of this guy. And it was later that night. I was in my cell in my top bunk, all by myself. No Bible, no preacher, nobody. Just the quietness. And it was that night. How I describe it is, it was like God showed me exactly who I was, the bad. I mean, peeled it off and showed me. Fortunately, he's not given me even the look of how bad I still am to this day. But that day, he gave me a glimpse. And, if it come down to saying the right words, if it came down to saying it the right way, I always say I wouldn't have got it. But it was that night that I just said, here I am. And I broke that night, and no bells and whistles went off. My toes didn't tingle. There's no fireworks show for me, no big procession. But that night, something changed, and it's never been the same for me since.
So you just said, here I am.
Here I am.
So if there were no fireworks, if there was no toe-tingling response, just shades of change, what did that start to show up as?
It's funny is that I started, the next day I started walking the way that I had regularly walked, going to places, doing the different things. And I describe it as some of those things that never tasted bad to me before began to taste bad to me. And to spare a lot of the details from the viewers, just some bad things. I mean, for example, I remember a fight, somebody coming up and doing something that otherwise before I would have never tolerated. I mean, just would not have tolerated. And I didn't. I got up, invited to a fight, and it was after that that I just said this to the company this morning. It was after that God began to ask me the question, is this who you want to be? And when I would have never went and made something right, I would have never backed down from something like that. Matter of fact, him and I were meeting somewhere to take care of this.
So you were a fighter.
I was a fighter, yeah. And we were going to meet and take care of this, and God just asked me that question, is this who you want to be? And something I had never done is back out from that, or to say, this isn't something that I want to do. But I went to that person and I just said, look, I ate crow, and I just said, this isn't who I'm trying to be. I don't want to get involved in this. And I think that person was pretty surprised. But that showed me, that was within just a week or two. That was a baby step that when I went and laid down that night, I went, wow.
So that moment became the moment for the first time that you thought it's possible to be something other
Absolutely.
than life has programmed me to be.
Absolutely.
So what happened after that?
So, I mean, just again, more things, more things began to happen. And my wife wasn't a believer at that time either. And we would talk on the phone and just be cussing and fighting. I mean, just, I knew that we weren't going to be together when I went in. I mean, I knew this. And then God did something miraculous with her. She went to get hair care product somewhere, and somebody gave her a card that had a scripture. Ended up inviting her to church, and we are having our nightly evening conversation, expecting a fight, and she apologizes to me for what she's been doing, who she was. And I'm thinking, I've been a pretty good manipulator, but I don't think I'm this good. I mean, why would she feel this way? And she told me the story of what had happened that week and led up to what had happened and be invited to this church. And man, I tell you, that night was the night that I put it in overdrive and said, okay, I'm moving forward. I mean, God is as real as I know. I mean, I've just seen too many things. And now this, when we were supposed to be, done. I mean, there's no way we're supposed to be together.
Because I noticed as you went to recount that moment, you took the biggest breath of this interview thus far. You were literally like,
yeah. It's just to hold back the emotion of, I remember it still to this day. I mean, that's been 20 years ago. I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. And that's when there was no more hiding who I wanted to be or who I was going to be.
Why were you afraid to be better?
I don't know. I think, sometimes I think it was just because
Did it seem like weakness?
No. I think that, I think it was more of, since I didn't think that it was going to be for me anyways, why attempt it? It depends on where you grow up. It depends on the culture that's around you.
Right.
It's kind of like that boiling frog story. You can put a frog in hot water to jump right out, but if you start the temperature and boil it, it'll stay right in there. I think cultures that we get caught up in, we believe these certain things, and I just, to believe anything other than that really could almost be just, more depressing, lead to a life of just letdowns.
How long did it take for you to get out?
5 years.
So in 5 years, you went from what to what?
Well, my first year was really about growing who I was. Really, I didn't mess with anything. I mean, I didn't watch TV for a year. I just began to read and study and just pray. I just took baby steps and growing and then after that, I began to read other books. I laugh. People look at me to this day, and of course, me sharing this story is going to be news to a lot of people. This is only something I share at certain places.
Wow.
And but I began to read about the stock market, for example. So I never knew anything about that. I began to read a book called Motley Fools,
Yeah.
the Guide to Investing. And by the way, I just met the CEO of Motley Fool. I'm in a group with him
Oh,
now.
wow.
How crazy is that? I began to learn from others. I began to read these biographies. I came up with, I didn't even have credit. Actually, I had horrible credit. I did have credit. I had real bad credit. And I began to study, what is credit? What does that do? How does money work? Began to study real estate. And I laugh. I speak at prisons all over, and I tell them, you know, I used to get some real big laughs out of people when I was studying these things, and they'd look and go, "What are you talking about, man? You're you know, look at where you're at, the charges that you had. I mean, it was drugs. You're a convict. It's all these different things, and you're not going to be anything." And I just continued to push on and make plans.
Let's stop right here, take a break. When we come back, I want to find out, you're reading, you're studying, you're growing. You get out 5 years later, where do you start to start over? This is Josh Smith. This is Anything is Possible. More in a moment.
Coming up,
So I got out with nothing. I mean, my wife was on welfare, 2 children on welfare, and living in government housing. And all I had was a plan.
5 years in prison, but you start reading and you start learning and you start growing. Real estate, finance, Motley Fools, and you're seeing your faith grow and you're seeing your marriage hold together. Most guys, when they go to prison, they don't come out with a wife.
No.
So when did you get out and what do you do with all of that?
So I got out with nothing. I mean, my wife was on welfare, 2 children on welfare, and living in government housing. I get out, and all I had was a plan. I had a plan for my finances, how to get that in order.
What was the plan?
I had planned to get $500 in savings so that I could then give it to the bank and borrow against it to begin building credit. And then kind of build it from there. I had to beg for my first job. I mean, literally beg. The place that I went in 4 times and begged for a $6 an hour job. It was 14, 15 years ago. And finally, I just said, listen, I'll clean toilets, I'll clean racks. It was a hardware store. I said, I'll do the jobs that nobody else will do. You don't like me, fire me, but give me a chance. And the guy just finally got wore out from seeing me, and he said—
Where was this?
This was in Clay Building Supply in London, Kentucky, or actually Manchester, Kentucky.
Wow.
And so they gave me a shot, and I worked there for 6 months. 6 months to get on my feet, and I saved every dollar I could, and began doing that plan. I got that $500 saved and went and borrowed against it. I got $1,000 saved and borrowed against it. Not doing anything with the money, just began to build credit, and then began to grow.
So I looked at the paper today, you know, your bio, and I'm looking at 16 million, and I'm trying to reconcile $6, no credit, living on welfare, right? And in 16 years, that's a really short window of time.
Yeah.
So when do you decide to go into business?
So I had gotten out. I was, you know, just spending time with my kids, and I went to work for a home improvements company that I'd worked for prior to that, and then I went on my first mission trip. So I was invited to go to Managua, Nicaragua, and for one, I didn't even know if I could go. I mean, I said, when the person invited me, I said, look, if I'm honest, I don't even think I can leave the county, much less the country. I've never been to any place like that. And just kind of on a step of faith, I said, hey, if God wants me to go, He'll open up the door, and it'd be too long of a story to share with you how big He opened the door, but He did. Borrowed money to go on my first mission trip. Didn't tell anybody I'd borrowed it, but I did. And so I went, and something just, again, continued to just change in me and my heart, what I wanted to do. And my wife and I felt God leading us to begin to work back in the jails and prisons and doing those things. So it was, you know, it's hard to do that with a job. So I ended up, starting a very small business, literally just to be able to have the freedom to be able to serve, literally to just be able to go into these places, these neighborhoods.
You weren't trying to
do it.
build some big empire.
Never.
You wanted the freedom to work hours that will allow you to minister.
Exactly.
You got to be kidding me.
No, I try to meet with every new employee that comes on an interview. I do the final interviews. All of our staff and management do all that, and they do a great job. And I just meet for one reason and one reason only. It's for culture. I want to see if they're going to fit this culture, and I want them to hear a little bit about the story leading to that, to make sure that this is something they want to do. This is something that they want to be a part of.
It's amazing. I guess your journey, if that guy hadn't confronted you in jail, right? If you hadn't had an angry reaction to someone trying to share faith with you, you might not have had faith on your mind in the battle that was going on in your mind.
Yeah.
Have you found that guy?
I have. I actually went several years ago to, I think he was in West Tennessee. I tracked him down, found him, and now after that time, him and I got to spend some quality time together.
So why don't we do this? Because we've got a part 2 this, right?
Okay.
We're just starting to unfold the story. When we come back in our next episode, I want to talk about your relationship with him and what became of that. This is Josh Smith, proof positive that anything is possible. Part 2 next time.